Hello everyone, Freedom Watchdog here, welcome to the channel. Today I'm going to give you a detailed breakdown of the pros and cons of owning Bitcoin and gold. And I'm talking from the perspective of if these are actually going to be used as a currency in the future. I'm not talking about what the benefits and pros and cons are of having them both as an investment solely just to make money. I'm not going to go into that, I'm just talking from the standpoint of when they will, and I believe they will, one day both be used as a means of exchange of value, particularly when these central bank digital currencies come into play. And I'm talking to all the beginners who are new to this kind of stuff or fairly new to this kind of stuff. If you've been doing this kind of stuff for a while, this is probably stuff you've already thought about. But if you're all in on one and not the other, then it's still worth watching, so you can get a good idea of whether it's going to be worth you getting hold of the other one while you can, and then you've got the best of both worlds, just like I do. So make sure you're taking notes, pay attention, because this is the world we're going to be heading into in the next few years. There'll be a government currency which will run alongside these two. If you've been watching any of my videos, I think you know where I'm coming from of where our currency systems are heading. So anyway, without further ado, let's get into the video. Just as a quick heads up, I own Bitcoin, gold and silver as well. One more thing, I'm also going to be briefly talking about silver in certain points, only because silver's always been used as a smaller denomination for gold. It's unlikely you're going to be paying for small purchases in gold, even small denominations of gold. You're going to be using silver for that. So while we're on the subject of transactions, let's have a closer look at them and see how each one compares in any given situation. Let's first look at what would be best to use if you're purchasing something large or expensive, such as this beautiful boat you can see on screen now. Now, it wouldn't have to be a boat, it could be a car, it could be anything really that is generally considered expensive by average standards. And bear in mind, we're talking mostly about peer-to-peer buying here, buying from the public rather than big chain superstores or showrooms, anything like that, because they're going to be confined to transacting with the government currency, whatever it is at that time, probably a central bank digital currency. So if I found myself in this situation, I'd much rather do this transaction with Bitcoin. Reason being, if you rock up and this thing's a scam, let's say, if you rock up with all your gold and all your silver and whatever else, well then they can just take that off you, can't they? But if you've got the Bitcoin on your phone, it's going to be a lot harder for them to force you to exchange it, because it's actually on a locked device. They need to force you in some way to exchange, rather than if you've got the the goodies in the back of your car, let's say. Well, they could just take that off you, couldn't they, if you was outnumbered? But they can't force you to, unless you've got a gun to your head or something, they can't force you to take out your phone, unlock it and do the transaction. And the second reason it would be much better to purchase something large like this with Bitcoin is because you'd be able to negotiate a lot better, and because you could get them right down to a Satoshi. So you're going to be able to get them down a lot further than what you could if you was, like, let's say, negotiating in ounces of gold. That could be a lot harder to do, and you may get a much better deal if you're negotiating in Bitcoin. Plus the whole transaction would just be a lot smoother, and I'd expect by the time this comes around, the transaction time in order for someone to receive Bitcoin after you send it would be a lot faster than what it is today. And that could be great, because with gold and silver, especially with the bars, it could be a precarious task just to make sure they are real and not fake. There are certain tests you can do yourself just to make sure that they are the real thing, but a lot of people may not want that hassle. One way around this with precious metals though, if it was quite a large purchase and you had precious metals stored with a storage service in a bullion vault, let's say, you could actually sign over those precious metals to somebody else. But again, that would be a much longer way of transacting rather than just, you know, using Bitcoin face to face. That would be a much easier way to do things, wouldn't it? But one more thing I'll mention about fakes in regards to precious metals. If you look on screen right now, you'll see this is a 2021 1 ounce Britannia coin I've recently picked up. Silver, but this is the same design in gold and platinum as well. As you can see, with the wavy background and the hologram mark on the bottom left hand side of the coin, if you've got one of these yourself and you hold it in your hand, you'll know what I mean when I say this would be incredibly difficult for someone to fake. I've no doubt they will try, but the expense on machinery that they'd have to take in order to fake this and keep that quality consistent as well would be incredibly difficult to maintain. They have to skimp out somewhere in order to make it profitable for themselves. It's the same with luxury watches. If you look at those closely, a lot of the fakes you will see, especially with a loop, you will see certain things which aren't right in the manufacturing process they've had to cut back on. And it's a really great thing to see these coins are going this way now, incorporating this kind of security technology. But as I say, Bitcoin wins this one because you don't have to worry about receiving any fake Bitcoin. Now, the next thing we're going to talk about is smaller transactions, such as if you're at a market, like you can see on screen now, and also if you're transacting with people that may not even want to hold a mobile phone, because once this central bank digital currency stuff comes in, people are not going to want to carry the phone everywhere because they'll realise exactly what's going on. And not only that, if you're transacting in Bitcoin for purchases like this, and let's say you only want a few apples, a few tomatoes or whatever, if you make that transaction, it could still take 5 or 10 minutes for it to come through. I know in the future it'll be a lot faster than what it is today, but what if, you know, everyone's using the system at the same time, so to speak, and it's just taking a lot longer than what it usually would. You stood there for 2 or 3 minutes. It's quite inconvenient compared to just going in your pocket, dropping the man some change, probably be some smaller denominations of silver. But also, what happens if there's a power cut? Because we all know the world we're heading into, they love green energy, and green energy isn't very reliable. It's been proved many times. California get quite a lot of blackouts apparently, and the reason being is because they rely so heavily on green energy. And even though it's improving all the time, it could take a very long time in order for our infrastructure to adapt. And if for whatever reason there's no electricity for a few days and you've lost charge to your phone, that could be a big problem. Internet access as well. That's why I think it's always best to have both rather than just being all in on one or the other. They both have pros and cons, and this is definitely a win for precious metals in terms of ease of transacting for smaller items and its robustness, given the fact that it can't be turned off and it's not reliant on anything to transact. Bitcoin needs to rely on, you know, a full infrastructure in order to transact, and if anything goes wrong with that, even if it's just temporary, that could be a problem. At least with precious metals, you could just transact in person just as you would with cash. It doesn't need to rely on anything. Now let's move on to storage. Now obviously in a physical sense, Bitcoin's going to be a hell of a lot easier to store than precious metals. And I'm going to be talking now from the perspective of holding that Bitcoin yourself rather than having a third party or exchange hold it, because in the kind of scenario we're talking about, Bitcoin would probably be outlawed or at least heavily restricted anyway. So the option of storing it yourself is to have it on a flash drive or to have it on a device which is meant for the purpose of storing cryptocurrency. It's otherwise known as cold storage. Now there's plenty of videos out there which will take you through the process if you don't know what I'm talking about. I'm just going to touch on some of the pros and cons of storing Bitcoin this way. So the biggest problem you might have is if you lose your access keys or your private keys, you would have lost access to all your Bitcoin more than likely. And this also applies if your access keys fall into the wrong hands. Those wrong hands have access to all your Bitcoin and any other cryptocurrency that you may have on there as well. So, you need to keep your access keys safe. Some people have actually memorized their access keys, and I can't remember how many digits they are now. I think they're like 50 or 60 digits long. It would be worth memorizing it, but then you've also got to remember, if anything happens to you and you have a family which you want to leave these digital assets to, you need a way of them having it as well, but also at the same time it being in a safe place. You could have it in a safe maybe in your house, but that also means that it could be vulnerable to fires or home invasions unless you've got a hidden fireproof safe, which wouldn't be a bad idea. But as you can see already, this would be quite an issue to negate. I suppose the only foolproof way of doing it is memorising the full access key and also passing that information on to your family members who you trust in case anything is unfortunate to happen to you. And I know for most people that just won't be realistic. Most people won't have the patience or be able to remember something that long, at least unless they force themselves to do it. And this really goes to show something with technology in general. It doesn't matter how secure something is, the flaw is always the human being, and that's always the weak point, at least most of the time it is. You see, how can you even entrust that information, that key, go into a professional service, let's say, which would carry out, if anything happened to you, it would make sure that your will gets carried out lawfully. How could you entrust them with that key? Because they've got employees, and at the end of the day, if your cryptocurrency disappears, then there's no evidence leading it back to them. They can always deny it, and there'd be just you wouldn't have a leg to stand on to even find out where it's gone, who's took it. It'd just be gone, and that'll be it. And I'm not for 1 minute saying it's not worth holding Bitcoin for this reason, but these are some of the issues that you really need to start thinking about. It might be okay to have your keys somewhere fairly secure, but how secure are they really? How can you really guarantee that you know them keys? If you've took the time to memorize them, then that's great. But if something happens to you, unless your family have done something similar, then the chances are that Bitcoin or crypto will be gone forever. So this is something you definitely need to bear in mind if you choose to go down this road. So now let's talk about the storage of physical gold or silver. And I'm going to be talking from the aspect of you storing them yourself, self-storage, rather than using a third-party storage facility, because in the kind of situation we're talking about, you'd be storing them yourself anyway. Now obviously storing silver or gold at your house, putting it somewhere where it's out of sight, out of mind, is obviously the best thing to do, and also somewhere where generally thieves aren't going to break into. All kind of hidden compartments, but probably not in furniture, maybe in a wall, a ceiling, a door, a floor, something like that. Just get creative. I've got a full video. If you go on my video playlist and look at the first video I ever posted, I've got a full video there where I talk about how to get creative and store your precious metals. So I'm not going to go into that too far now. Obviously the pros and cons are similar to storing Bitcoin in a way, in that they could be vulnerable to fires, it could be vulnerable to theft or break-ins, and obviously a big bad point about if you had a lot of precious metals is moving it around. If you was moving house, let's say, and you had to move all your stuff, well, you could have quite a lot of weight to move as well, especially I'm talking about silver specifically here, rather than gold. Unless you are quite wealthy and you've got quite a number of 5 kilo gold bars to move, that would be nice. But it would be a nightmare as well. Anyone who's held any kind of precious metals will know the kind of weight that they bring. And I'm not talking so much about 9 carat gold here, I'm talking about 24 carat, 999 pure gold or 999 pure silver. They're an incredibly dense material to hold, and it's just something that most people aren't used to if you've not handled that kind of stuff before. Trying to, even if you're a fairly strong person, moving several kilos of precious metals around is not a nice thing to do, just because of how heavy it is and how heavy it is in such a small area, and also because it's worth so much. At least for me, if I'm doing something like that, I'm on edge about it. I'm kind of thinking where it is all the time. So, maybe your behaviour would be a bit different if you had to move it around. But all that being said, this is one of the great things about it. It's you hold it and you own it, like they say. If you can't hold it, you don't own it, and it's very true. If you can manage to get long-term storage sorted out in your house and nobody else knows it's there, then it's pretty much going to be perfectly safe as long as it's well hidden, like I say. And of course you can make that area somewhat fireproof. You see, with cryptos, if you had cold storage, you'd have to think about flooding as well, but obviously that's not an issue for precious metals. It doesn't matter if it gets a bit wet, it wouldn't matter at all. But even if you had, say, a laminated piece of paper with that user key on there, well, that could be an issue. It could still get, water damage. Water could still seep through, especially if it's sat there in water for some time. So these are all things you need to bear in mind. Now, for these reasons, I can't really choose one over the other, to be honest, in terms of storage. They both got really good points, and which complement each other, and they've both got bad points which also complement each other. So it's just really what's best for you in your situation. Hopefully you can see the light with holding both and not just holding one, and I strongly urge you to think through everything that I've spoken about today if you do decide to hold any. Thank you for watching this breakdown of gold and Bitcoin, and as I said, silver then. Make sure you like, comment and subscribe. And make sure you do comment as well, because I've only got 50 subscribers at the time of recording this. So I've got a lot of time to answer questions. If there's anything you're not sure about, put it in the comment section below and I'll get back to you. So like I say, thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.